UFC 292, Sterling versus O'Malley takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main events, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card. So far, because we are going to have some more fights added to it throughout the week of the pay-per-view. Very good decision-making from the UFC. Maybe they should have had the Ultimate Fighter finish a week earlier than this. Then we would have the full card on the week of the pay-per-view, known to us, the fight fans. Either way, we're going to start with the early prelim opener of Kurt Holobaugh versus Austin Hubbard. This is, of course, one of the Ultimate Fighter finales, and I'm going to go with Austin Hubbard over Kurt Holobaugh. I really did like Kurt Holobaugh's performance against Jason Knight, but I think Jason Knight is a tailor-made matchup for Kurt Holobaugh. He's a scrapper, he doesn't move his feet much, he's rarely going to shoot a takedown, he's not going to throw too many kicks, he's just going to scrap with you in the pocket, and that's what Holobaugh does best. Even Shane Burgos learned that the hard way. You don't just scrap with hooks in the pocket against a guy like Kurt Holobaugh. But Austin Hubbard throws straight punches. He throws them very well. In fact, he threw them with Roosevelt Roberts for 3 straight rounds, who's a very rangy guy for the lightweight division himself. Although that was a terrible fight, Austin Hubbard also has a grappling game that you do have to watch out for, because he can offensively grapple. He's got amazing takedown defense as well. So really, I see this as a fight where Austin Hubbard can decide where he wants this fight to take place. And I think that's a massive amount of power that he has going into this matchup. Now, although Kurt Holobaugh might be a little bit better on the feet, especially in the pocket, I think Hubbard moves very well on the back foot. He throws a lot of good straight punches, a lot of front kicks to the body, got a lot of low kicks as well. So he's not just going to stand there in the pocket like Jason Knight. He's going to mix it up, and I think that's a bit too much for Kurt Holobaugh. We move on up the card. Maryna Moroz versus Karine Silva. I'm going to go with Karine Silva over Maryna Moroz. I actually think Karine Silva's pretty good. Now, of course, she hasn't had these performances where you're like... She's had great performances, though. You know what I mean? Now, the opponents is what I'm trying to say, is like, you never really know. You know what I mean? Like, she can beat some opponents, but then you're like, yeah, but how good is that opponent really? But Ketlin Souza was on a win streak coming into the UFC herself, on a 5-fight win streak against some pretty decent regional opponents. And Karine Silva finished her in 1 round. She finished the opponent before that in 1 round, who was Poliana Botelho, who was also in the UFC. She beat a 22-3 female fighter, Quihi Yan, by guillotine choke in the 2nd round. I like in women's MMA where I see a bunch of first-round finishes. Okay, sometimes it can be a bit of a red flag, because you're like, okay, well, what happens if it doesn't go to a finish? You know what I mean? Well, we find out, because in her career, she's already lost to Maryna Moroz earlier in her career by armbar, by the way. But in her career, she's lost that decision. So I feel like she's learned the mistake of maybe letting fights get away from her if she doesn't get that finish in the 1st or 2nd round. So I think she's learned from that. She's got a ton of experience. She's 16-4, okay? She's still only 29 years of age compared to the 31 of Maryna Moroz, who's been around a bit more. I'm going to go Karine Silva. I think she's more talented. I know she lost before, but I think she's gotten way better since then. And Maryna Moroz is coming off a loss to Jennifer Maia. And again, a win over Maria Ragapova. She did beat Mayra Bueno Silva. But this is just women's MMA, so I'm not going to put any stock into that whatsoever. How did she beat Mayra Bueno Silva is just crazy to me, because now you've got Mayra Bueno Silva beating Holly Holm. So to be honest with you, I am going to go Karine Silva, but it's a tricky pick, to be honest with you. It's a real tricky pick, but I am going to go with Karine Silva getting this one done. I think she's got a ton more momentum. I think she's improved a lot more since their last fight, and I think she is the more improving, younger fighter. I reckon she'll get this one done by submission early on, by going a bit more offensive, and this time not getting armbarred by Maryna Moroz. I'm going to go with Karine Silva getting this one done on the prelims. We move on. Up the card, Andrea Lee versus Natalia Silva. I'm going with Natalia Silva. You guys know how I feel about Natalia Silva. One of the rare good female MMA prospects. She's very, very good. Okay? Extremely good. Also, maybe it was because Mayra Bueno Silva had a terrible weight cut down to 125 and didn't have great performances in that weight class that she lost those fights. Now she's not cutting as much weight. She's at bantamweight. Just to add that as a note into the last one. Either way, this is a great matchup. Natalia Silva versus Andrea Lee. I've just got to go with Natalia Silva as the up-and-comer here because Andrea Lee has taken a ton of damage in her career. Now, she did put up a decent fight against Macy Barber and did have an okay performance against Vivian Araújo, but she ended up taking so much damage. And what I'm seeing from Natalia Silva on the feet so far in her career is her just looking stunning against these opponents. She's destroying opponents back to back to back. Now, she hasn't fought the best, but she dominated Jasmine Jasudavicius, which does mean something. She beat Teresa Blader pretty easily as well, spinning back kicked her in the face in the third round as she went for a takedown. And since then, Teresa Blader has won in the UFC. So, although the Victoria Leonardo fight doesn't tell us anything, I have no idea why they even made that matchup, it did give her more experience, and she took no damage, and she's turning around, 10 weeks, 11 weeks later for this fight. I'm going to go with the younger fighter here in Natalia Silva. Was very impressed by her absolutely schooling Jasmine Jasudavicius, who has since done pretty well herself and beat Miranda Maverick, so she's pretty good herself. And she's only 26 years of age, Natalia Silva. She's got a lot of time to improve, whereas Andrea Lee is 34. Coming off some damaging fights, 2 losses in a row. I think it's about time. I'm going to go with Natalia Silva getting this one done by decision win, 29-28. But Andrea Lee is going to make it a little bit more tough than she expects. We move on. Up the card, Gerald Meerschaert versus Andre Petroski. Amazing matchup. The GOAT is back. GM3 returns. But Andre Petroski is going to out-grapple him and probably submit him, I think, in this fight. I think it's going to be a rare Gerald Meerschaert submission loss. And it might happen in the third round. Now, of course, you don't want to be in the third round with GM3. But after his last fight, we're just seeing... You can't be a GOAT forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was the GOAT between the times of, like, when he was 30 to 33. And after he let Khamzat Chimaev beat him, of course. But now we got 2 losses here. He beat Bruno Silva, which is a crazy win. But he lost to Jotko. Whatever. Got out-grappled. All good. But he lost back-to-back to Joe Pyfer in grappling and lost to him by KO in the first round in their UFC fight at UFC 287. That was only 4 months ago, that KO loss, and it was a pretty bad one. And he's not moving up a weight division like Alex Pereira. He's going to have to do that big weight cut back down to middleweight again. I just don't think he's taken the adequate amount of time. Like, he went straight into a grappling tournament, and now he's got a fight against Petroski. I know Petroski's not the most dangerous on the feet, but I really do believe Petroski is smart enough not to shoot his head on the outside of the single leg or anything like that and give up maybe a guillotine attempt. And I even think if Gerald Meerschaert does go for the guillotine, Petroski's got such good scrambles, he's going to be able to clear the legs and get to the nice side where that guillotine's not going to be as tight. So I truly believe that we're going to see Andre Petroski, A, beat up Meerschaert on the feet a little bit, but B, maybe have the option to just ragdoll Meerschaert here and keep top position, because I was very, very impressed with Andre Petroski's performance against Wellington Turman. Seemed dominant after a bit of a risky start, and Wellington Turman's no joke in the grappling. Beat Nick Maximov, and he's really improved me with his recent performances. Been grappling a bunch. Got submitted in his last grappling match, but beat OSP in a grappling match. Ragdolled Eric Anders and subbed him in a grappling match as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing him compete. I think he's a good prospect in the middleweight division. I can already tell Meerschaert's going to sub him. But we're going with Petroski, getting this one done by TKO to ground and pound or decision whilst beating up Meerschaert on the ground. We move on. Up the card, Gregory Rodrigues versus Denis Tiuliulin. I'm going to go with Gregory Rodrigues, but I've got a whiff that if the odds are that crazy, if you start noticing come fight day that these odds are absolutely ridiculous, it might not be bad to put some money on Denis Tiuliulin. Now, I don't think he's going to win, and I actually think this is going to be a fight where Gregory Rodrigues might shoot a takedown. He might do. He showed a bit of grappling against Armen Petrosian, and he has got grappling in his game. He will go for takedowns, but he just likes to stand and fight against people that he thinks are also going to do that. But I think if Tiuliulin ever has any sort of success, there is that option to be taken to the ground, because Denis Tiuliulin's ground game just seems a little bit rudimentary. It's not that terrible. It's not like he's lost on the ground. He's not too shabby, but it's not amazing. You know what I mean? There is a part of that game where if Rodrigues needs to, he can take this to the ground. But I do think Rodrigues is just going to beat him on the feet. Denis Tiuliulin's good, and I do root for him because he's got a cool voice. This is good battle. Let's go, Jamie. This is good battle, brother. I like his voice. Very Reznovish. But you know, he looked good against Jamie Pickett. And it's just, you know, I don't know what to put stock in there. And I know that Gregory Rodrigues has lost to Jordan Williams. I completely understand that. But I am going to have to go with him here. He is coming off a KO loss very recently. No, not very recently. I don't know why I screamed so loud. The Tiuliulin fight has been delayed. It was supposed to happen a bit earlier. I was amped up for nothing. I reckon he's going to win. Gregory Rodrigues wins. Jesus, I read that date wrong. I thought he was turning around like 2 months later, but either way. I think Gregory Rodrigues gets this one done by KO. Tiuliulin is good on the feet, but he's too hittable. And I don't like that Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz, Colby Covington type style anywhere above welterweight. I just don't like it because the power's too much, especially with guys like Gregory Rodrigues. I don't like relying on a guy to take a bunch of shots like a heavy bag and start coming back as the fight goes on. So I'm going to go Gregory Rodrigues by KO. We move on. Up the card, Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares. I've got Brad Tavares over Chris Weidman. I like Weidman, and I actually picked him to come back and beat Omari Akhmedov quite a long time ago when he made that comeback then. And he looked good against Omari Akhmedov, and at that time, Omari Akhmedov was a formidable opponent in the middleweight division that he deserved a lot of respect for beating. So he did beat Omari Akhmedov and look good, but then he broke his leg against Uriah Hall in April of 2021. It's now August of 2023. He's been out for over 2 years. That's no joke. Not at all. He recently did a grappling tournament and lost in March. No big deal. He's just trying to shake off the cobwebs. I get it. But why is my mustache curling up so much in today's video? I am going to have to go with Brad Tavares. I know he just lost and he hasn't been looking good, but I think style-wise, he will outstrike Chris Weidman, who's been out for a very long time. He's been active as well, even though he's been losing and he lost to Bruno Silva and lost to Dricus du Plessis. Hey, he hung in there with Dricus du Plessis in hindsight, right? Took him to a decision, made a very close second round, won the first round against Dricus du Plessis. So he's still in there, and he also has a win over Omari Akhmedov as well, Antonio Carlos Jr. I just don't see the crazy sudden KO ability of Weidman, which he's going to need to finish a guy like Brad Tavares early. If you go to a decision with Tavares, it's going to be a tough fight. Even Israel Adesanya, who did school Tavares, had a pretty grueling 5-round decision. It was one of the reasons why I didn't really believe in Adesanya on the come-up, because he was having these decisions against guys like Tavares, who we've seen Whittaker dust in the first round. So, I am going to go with Brad Tavares, not to mention the best part about Brad Tavares' entire MMA game is his takedown defense. This dude refuses to be taken down, has some of the craziest dexterity in his legs, will not be taken down, crazy flexibility. You can hold a single leg above his head. He'll still find a way to balance it out and stay on his feet. I'm going to have to go with Brad Tavares over Weidman. I can't trust Weidman after that leg break and nearly half years off. I'm not going with Weidman. I think he's going to lose by a TKO in round 2 or 3, or maybe just a decision 30-27. He just gets outpointed on the feet and can't get a takedown. We move on. Up the card, Marlon Vera versus Pedro Munhoz. I'm going with Pedro Munhoz over Marlon Vera. I don't think Marlon Vera is that good, okay? I think he perennial nerve kicked O'Malley, and that's about it. Like, Rob Font was destroying him in their fight, and he rocked Rob Font. Good for him. It's a great win. It really is an amazing win. But seeing Rob Font get manhandled by a one-armed Sandhagen kind of put his place in the bantamweight division in perspective a little bit, right? Not to mention, Pedro Munhoz is a guy who easily finished Rob Font, dropped him and subbed him with a guillotine choke a while back. Different Rob Font, different Pedro Munhoz. He's coming off a win over Chris Gutierrez, who was, he destroyed Frankie Edgar. A guy who Vera needed a KO against him round 3. This is the worrying thing for me about this matchup for Marlon Vera, because we find Vera in positions where he needs a finish. Against Dominic Cruz, it's like, dude, the decision's getting away from him. He needs a finish here, and he finds it. You know what I mean? But then when he doesn't find the finish, you'll notice very often, he loses to Aldo, loses to Song Yadong. Very close fight, could have beaten him. That was a much, much younger version of Song Yadong because he's so young already. 3 years is everything to him. So I think I'm going to have to go with Pedro Munhoz, because you find yourself with Marlon Vera fights saying, oh, here comes the finish. He's going to get a finish soon, or he'll break a guy as the fight goes on. But Pedro Munhoz doesn't get broken as the fight goes on. He's got crazy conditioning, and this is a free rounder as well, which notoriously, for Marlon Vera's career, have been the tougher matchups that he's been having when he has free rounders, right? His free rounder was against, Aldo, Davy Grant, I think was also a free rounder. Yes, it was, of course. And he had a free rounder against Edgar as well. And those have been his worst performances. Song Yudong fight was a free rounder as well. 5 rounders, he seems to have his chance. So not only does he not have time to build into the fight as much as he normally would in a 5 rounder, but he's in there with a guy with Munhoz who doesn't slow down, doesn't get tired, and doesn't ever get wobbled ever. Look through Munhoz's career. Dude does not get wobbled. Has been fighting the who's who of the bantamweight division. He fought Rafael Assunção in 2014. He fought Rafael Assunção in 2014 in the UFC, in his debut. That's literally, 9 years ago? He was fighting Assunção, and since then we've gone through Rivera. Justin Scoggins was a tricky guy at one point. I remember him, little taekwondo type guy, karate dude. Rob Font, John Dodson, Brett Johns, Brian Caraway, who beat Aljo around that time. Not around that time, but just before that time. Cody Garbrandt, he beat him. Got a little bit stunned by him, but that's Garbrandt. You know what I mean? And he immediately switched back on, gritted down in the pocket and finished Garbrandt. Aljo, he fought him to a decision. Edgar, he should have won. Rivera, Aldo, Cruz, O'Malley, Gutierrez, I'm going to have to go with Pedro Munhoz. He doesn't get finished. He doesn't get wobbled. He doesn't slow down. And Marlon Vera seems to rely on those things a lot of times to win fights. And Munhoz is tricky. He's small. He's got short arms. He's annoying with his leg kicks. And I think it's going to really annoy Marlon Vera at range and pester him for 3 rounds to a decision. And people are going to start to say, where's Marlon Vera's killer instinct? When in reality, it's just like he just didn't land a front kick to the face this time. Maybe I jinxed it. Hopefully I did. I'd rather see Marlon Vera win, so when O'Malley loses, they can do the rematch. Might have just spoiled my main event pick. Either way, I'm going with Pedro Munhoz by decision. 29-28, I'll say. We move on. Neil Magny versus Ian Garry. This is a letdown to me. I don't like this whatsoever. You want to know why I don't like this? Because I was really looking forward to Ian Garry versus Jeff Neal. And I might have picked Jeff Neal. I might have picked Ian Garry. You know what I mean? It's not one of those fights where you can't pick either guy. It was really a 50-50 matchup. But yeah, I'm going to have to go with Ian Garry here. And that's the sad part, right? Although it's arguably better matchup in terms of, respect for winning. Not really, but Neil Magny did beat Jeff Neal pretty clearly. So, he gets that as a one-up over his last opponent that was supposed to be Jeff Neal. Oh, I'm fighting the guy that beat you. So there's some kind of moral victory there for him. But this is a way easier matchup. Jeff Neal's smaller. Ian Garry would be punching down at him, leaving his chin open. We saw Song Kenan drop him. Jeff Neal can do that. You know what I mean? So that would be a really interesting matchup. But Ian Garry is improving at a rapid rate. Coughed over a fart. Ian Garry is improving at a rapid rate. And that's something that you can't deny, because the conversation about Ian Garry, I've never seen it change more about a fighter fight per fight. He has his debut. Everyone's like, another guy about to get absolutely embarrassed. He's going to get rocked by someone real soon. Then he beats Darian Weeks, has a weak performance, no pun intended. And people are like, never going to be anything, 29-28, close decision, you didn't even do anything. Then the Gabe Green fight happens, and people change on a dime. He's just looking slick. He's finally looking comfortable. There's no shaky feeling out period in the first round that he was having. He switched on immediately. Song Kenan, if you take away that one knockdown, he schooled him for 3 straight rounds. Really improved and showed improvements there. And then smokes D-Rod in a round, who really gave it to Neil Magny pretty, you know what I mean? He was dishing out some damage to Neil Magny. I was desperately trying to find a way to not explain D-Rod giving Magny problems in a sus way there. I don't know why I said giving it to him. But he was dishing out some damage in that fight with Neil Magny. Looking good on the feet with his straight punches. But he was so ploddy still, and Neil Magny was still getting hit by those shots. And then D-Rod lets him up in round 3, and Magny gets the takedown. One, I don't think Magny's going to be out grappling Ian Garry. Ian Garry does have a judo background. He's very tall. He knows the basics of takedown defense. And mainly the people that know the basics of takedown defense can beat a guy like Neil Magny. So I think Ian Garry is going to be picking at range, chopping at the legs. I think this is a great matchup for him. He's training with Philip Bro in the build-up to this, who is basically Neil Magny, but worse, slightly, I guess, because he lost to Neil Magny. But they're basically even, right? Because it was a very even fight. So Ian Garry's got a nice training partner for it. I think he's going to go out there and do work against Magny. Not to mention, Magny, although he stays ready and he's always the guy that steps in on short notice and he does train at elevation, so he's always in shape, it's not ideal for him to be taking this fight on a week's notice, is it really? So I'm going to have to go with Ian Garry. And it's also at 170. So it's not even like Neil Magny's getting a catch weight done for him here either. So I think Garry has a better weight cut. He's more prepared. And I think he smokes Neil Magny in round 1 after chewing up his leg for about 3 minutes. We move on. Up the card, Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos. I'm going with Zhang Weili over Amanda Lemos. Now, I'm worried about that pick because, you know, Amanda Lemos is Amanda. You know what I mean? Like, clues in the name, guys. We're starting to see a trend here with these Amandas out of Brazil. She's Amanda, but she's also 36 years of age. You know what I'm saying? So she's not some young, let me speak properly here. She's not some young, undefeated prospect coming up that we don't know about yet. We've seen her lose to Jessica Andrade. We've seen her nearly lose to Angela Hill. She lost to Leslie Smith in her UFC debut, got KO'd in the second round in that fight. So it's like, we've seen her like take Mizuke Inoue to a decision. You know what I mean? There's different fights that we see in her career where all of a sudden it's not this world beater that's going to beat the champion in Zhang Weili. She beat Maryna Rodrigues in the first 2 rounds, not much of anything, though. You know what I mean? But she rocked Maryna Rodrigues in the third. They stepped in, very early stoppage. And then Michelle Waterson was giving her some trouble-ish, but then she got the guillotine in the second round. I just feel like if these other opponents like Angela Hill, Maryna Rodrigues, Michelle Waterson Gomez can give you some trouble, Zhang Weili can take that to another level because of her athleticism, her speed, her power as well. I think this is going to be the first time Lemos is really going to have to worry about someone else hitting her hard other than Jessica Andrade. And what happened in that fight, she got walked down badly and choked against the cage standing with a standing arm triangle choke. Crazy finish from Andrade. But you saw what happened. As soon as someone who also had power didn't have respect for Lemos, they walked straight through her and buzzed her up in the first round, choked her out. You know what I mean? So I think Zhang Weili's also going to have that ability, but she also has shown in her recent fight, which is why I'm more confident in her than I was originally, that she can now grapple. You know what I mean? She can now grapple. We've seen her fights before. I remember she had a fight once. I think it was against Tisha Torres. And she was on the bottom in that fight. She got taken down a few times. So people were like, I don't know, maybe Esparza could beat her. I don't know, dude. Maybe her grappling's not so good. There was always kind of that question because we'd only really seen her have a great known performances against strikers. But then Rose Namajunas beats her. She shows in tremendous improvement in the grappling in her rematch with Rose Namajunas. Looks good there. Has great grappling against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Dominates her on the ground for a whole round, nearly a 10-8. People forget about that. I know it was Joanna coming back, but it's still Joanna Jędrzejczyk's takedown defense. And she got ragdolled in round 1 and nearly 10-8'd. Then she got finished in the second round. And then we see her take down Carla Esparza, scramble with her, win the scrambles, get a rear naked choke. I think there's too many options for Zhang Weili, and I'm not going to rely on puncher's chance in women's strawweight. So that's not what I'm going to pick a fight based on. I'm going with Zhang Weili. She also has that puncher's chance, but all that skill to back her up. So I'm going Zhang Weili, and Amanda Lemos, again, 36 years of age, just had, 9 months out of the cage as well. I'm going to have to go with Zhang Weili. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, the main event. Finally, we arrive. I'm going with Aljamain Sterling. Now, I would like to see O'Malley win. I don't mind Aljo winning, and I think if Aljo does win, he's the bantamweight GOAT, but that's another video for another time. I don't mind O'Malley winning. If he wins, he'll be a big name. He'll be a superstar. They'll probably do the Sandhagen matchup straight away and say, oh, sorry, who's Moroz? It'll be wonderful. But I think Sterling's got him. And I can't go off of like, oh, what would be wonderful and what would be against Moroz's success. You know what I mean? I don't want that. I think Aljo's going to win. I think he's going to win impressively. And I think he's going to beat up O'Malley and maybe finish him by TKO to ground and pound from the back mount in round 1 or round 2. O'Malley's very good. He's got knees up the middle and he can counter grapple somewhat. He's good at getting wrist control. He must have big hands because he seems like when he gets wrist control on someone, they can't escape it. He also cheats massively. Saw that against Piotr Jan when he was being taken down, which isn't a good look if you're fighting Aljo, by the way. Jan taking you down and spending time on top of you. I know Jan's not got, as bad stand-up as Sterling, but Sterling's not far behind. You know what I mean? Like, Jan's definitely way better, and the reason why Sterling can compete with him on the feet is because of the grappling. That same story is going to be the case in this fight with O'Malley as well. There is the grappling there, and therefore Sterling will look better on the feet than he would do in a kickboxing match. It's just how it is. So I can apply that logic from the Jan fight to the O'Malley fight as well, because Jan and O'Malley will therefore be fighting under the same circumstances against someone who they're worried about taking them down. But I think O'Malley will be more worried than Jan was, because I think Jan really did believe in his takedown defense after the first fight. But Aljo's still all right on the feet. You know what I mean? He's still very good on the feet. Tricky as well, which I think is a good thing here, because if he was traditional, maybe it'd be easier for O'Malley to land his shots. I do hope O'Malley wins. Spins are going to be taken away. We just saw what happened with Grasso versus Shevchenko. Spins are going to be kind of taken away from O'Malley. The leg kicks are a risk because he's going to try and take him down off those leg kicks. Knees up the middle are a risk because Aljo does a bunch of goofy movements anyway, and you never know really what he's going to do. If he's going to shoot, if he's going to dip his head into a head kick. Like, he does really weird, goofy movements. DJ imitated it very well in an interview I saw on Helwani's show, that worm. So I'm going to have to go with Aljo, dude. There's too much for O'Malley to worry about. I know Aljo's just fought and he has to make a quick turnaround. It's not like he took crazy damage against Cejudo. Mainly the weight cut back-to-back is going to be the problem for him. But at the same time, it's not like JDM cutting to 170 twice in 2 weeks. He's cutting to 135 after a 3-month break. Like, he's had over 3 months off. I reckon he'll be all right to start this fight. And I don't think he's going to need a long time to win this fight either. I think this is going to be a takedown early from Sterling. He's going to immediately pressure O'Malley backwards. O'Malley's going to try and knee up the middle. Some of his little stutter step movements to try and slip out against the cage. And I think eventually Aljo will get a hold of him, will get his back. And I don't think he's going to choke him out. I think he's going to TKO him to prove a point. And I think he just wants to be mean out there to O'Malley, who has been sort of bickering back and forth with him in the build-up. So I think he's going to go for a TKO. I don't think he gets the rear naked choke. I think he'll control O'Malley, and we'll see a late first round or middle of the second round back mount TKO to ground and pound. I'm going with Aljamain Sterling. I'll break it down in a bit more detail later this week. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go trim my mustache because this thing is annoying the fuck out of me. See you later. Goodbye.